Hey guys, and welcome back, and hello if you are new. I hope all of you have had a really great week and a really great month, which brings me to the reason of this video, which is my monthly favourites. So if you've not tuned into this before, it's basically a wrap up of some of the stuff I've heard. It might be released this month, it might be a little bit further ahead, or it could be something that I completely slept on and then I've just discovered and I really want to shout about it. So the way I kick things off is the first album that I kind of feature is called my feature favourite, and that is probably the album I love the most. And this month, it's Sumac's May You Be Held. This is the follow-up to 2018's Love in Shadow, which was my kind of gateway into the band. And if you're not familiar with them, they can probably be a bit of a hard pill to swallow, but definitely do persevere, because once it clicks, and it will click, it's so great. Really, they're the only band that can get me into that sort of idea of what noise is, and I think that's what I really enjoy about the album, is just how abstract it is. This is an album that looks towards the warmer, more compassionate ideas that we as humans can harbour, and particularly the band wanted to kind of... And for those looking for, you know, the familiar riffs of Turner, you can find them on Consumed, the title track May You Be Held, which is like 20 minutes long and goes through so many different emotions, but really pushes that boundary forward again. Honestly, I think it's one of those albums where you really have to listen to it and not really do anything else. It was also recorded by Matt Bales, who, if you don't know, has recorded Oceanic, Panopticon, In the Absence of Truth, the ISIS classics, so it sounds absolutely mega. The album is 5 tracks long and moves between post-rock, sort of noise, but also a bit of avant-garde, and the best way I can describe it is that if you were to stop open heart surgery midway through, it would look like Murder. And that's kind of the way I approach Sumac, is that you can't really sort of listen to one bit without understanding the whole. And that's really what I think took me a while to get into the band. But now that I have, they are absolutely fantastic. Give it a couple of listens, it might not sort of click with you straight away, but I promise when it does, it'll be really great. Gorephilia have that early death metal sound to them and channel the likes of Morbid Angel, early Nile, some Dying Fetus, particularly on Ouroboran Labyrinth, I think it is. They've got a death metal sound which is distinctively new and modern and definitely sounds of its time. The new album has got 7 tracks and 2 sort of interludes. There's also a fantastic channeling of good old Trey Azagthoth on Not For The Weak, which I thought was really cool. And they sometimes kind of lurch forward, as you can see on Devotion Upon the Worm, which really kind of has that obituary sort of like about it, and I really like the slower sort of style of things. They are big players in the Finnish death metal scene, and I think this album's going to bring them to even bigger heights, really, and I think that it's probably going to put them a little bit more on the map than they were with that album with the guy who was being electrocuted, which is their previous album. But I was very close to putting this as my feature favourite, so it's very much neck and neck. A really great album, don't miss out on this, it's really fantastic. So the second in a series of EPs to come out from Ihsahn is Pharos, and Pharos I think is more kind of lighter than what we saw on Telemark. There's also a lot more of a cinematic sound. I felt like at times I was listening to almost like a Bond movie soundtrack, which I mean that in the best way. And it's also got a lot more progressive styles to it. There was even the actual title track, Pharos, which reminded me of Porcupine Tree a little bit in the intro. And there's also a bit more of a pop sensibility to it. And with that in mind, there's 2 cover songs, one which is Portishead Roads, and the second which is an Aha single of Manhattan Skyline. And I think they're both really a testament to how creative Ihsahn is, because he's basically flipped the Portishead song completely on its head and kind of rejigged it enough that you understand what it is, but it's clearly Ihsahn's style. And then you've got Manhattan Skyline, which has guest vocals from Einar Solberg of Leprous. Also, I think it's kind of cool that Einar was in his band before Leprous became bigger, and, you know, they were sort of session musicians. And I think also the choice of the covers are really interesting as well. You know, it's quite left field, it's quite out there, particularly the fact that it's like pure pop that he's then retelling in his own style, I think is really, really interesting. This is the second album from the band, and they definitely are in that death metal school of thought and channel, I'd say, early Entombed, but with a little bit more of a benighted style, extreme metal vibe, which I thought was really cool. The album's also been mastered by Jens Bogren and sounds absolutely fantastic, so you can hear everything you need to when those dynamics are kind of kicking in, and the way it all kind of comes together is part of what the big charm, I think, for me was. And it's got this savage riffing throughout that, you know, reminds me of Black Breath, Entombed, that sort of thing, but also has a real punk feel to it, which, again, I really liked. It's hard to believe that this is Kataklysm's 14th release, and I think they've been going for like 30 years or something. And to hear the level of quality on here, I think, was really quite surprising. I was really blown away with just how melodic it was. You know, there's real classic mellow death happening here. And of course, why wouldn't there be? You know, Kataklysm are a band that I think did kind of spearhead that sort of second movement of it, for sure. But I also think it's interesting because this is the first album that they've used 7-string guitars on, so that's a little bit different and really kind of brings that sort of low rumble in. It's definitely Kataklysm being Kataklysm, but there's just so much melody on here that I really, really liked. But the album overall is really, really interesting, very solid death metal, and some of the drum work on here is absolutely insane. Really, really amazing stuff from Olivier Baudouin. Next up is a band that share characteristics with Baroque and Igor, but also the Black Dahlia murder. So they're an Icelandic band called Cult of Lilith, and the album's called Mara, and it is interesting. It's a very unexpected album, and I think a bit of a dark horse in the Metal Blade signings, and I think a lot of people kind of didn't really get on the sort of hype of it, but it's a technical death metal band for sure. There's a lot of kind of crazy solos happening, all sorts of crazy stuff, but what I like the most is the sense of experimenting that actually goes on. So there's a track called Purple Tide, which out of nowhere has this weird kind of like Doors section to it that completely sort of floored me. It was like Rhodes piano, all that sort of stuff. And then there was also Profeta Paloma, which is like a full flamenco kind of thing, which I thought was really interesting, and the way they incorporate that into their sound is something different that I don't think has really been done that much before. So I think they're definitely one to watch for sure. Next up, we're back with Dark Descent Records as they come through again on Proscription and their album Conduit. So I recommend this album if you're a fan of Behemoth, if you're a fan of like that blackened death metal sort of sound. It's really quite full on, it's quite technical at times, but also has that sense of atmosphere, which I thought was really interesting. I do think that Proscription are onto something a bit different, and the album may not have kind of gone up on everyone's radars, but if you're a fan of, yeah, that sort of blackened death metal style, then I think you'll really, really dig this. Continuing on with the black metal theme is Odosa, I think that's how you pronounce it. So this band are signed on Church Road Records, which you may know have basically adopted Svalbard and Palm Reader, and it's Sammy Irwin from Employed to Serve's label, And I think it's really interesting. It's very intense black metal, but I also didn't know that this is a one-man band. So given the fact he's put together all of this stuff, makes for such an interesting listen. Again, I'm always one to talk about atmosphere, and Odosa has lots and lots of atmosphere that really does build. And given the fact that it is just one guy, I think he does make a lot of noise. And there's a lot of dynamics, there's a lot of interesting things that come out of this album as well. The band, I think, have only been going for a couple of years, and they've had 2 split EPs, and this is their first debut album. And, you know, the reason I sort of mention Crypt and Spectral Voice and things like that is because they have that real sense of, like, impending doom to them. And the tracks on here are so well put together. But what I really love about the band is that sense of real raw power comes through so much. Void Rot was definitely one of the ones I was looking forward to the most, and I cannot say enough that they've defied all my expectations. I didn't know of these guys at all until someone suggested them to me, and I'm so glad that they did, because they're such a fucking great band. They hail from the UK and are, of course, death metal, but they have a real sense of heavy metal in terms of that sense of melody, but they've also got a thrash metal vibe. I think where the energy's concerned, it definitely also reminded me of Horrendous at some points, but then I think that they're really part of quite a thriving scene in the UK at the minute. You know, we've got bands like Horrified, Cryptic Shift, and now Live Burial, who are just as fantastic. It's also worth mentioning that the label Transcending Obscurity have some of the sickest vinyl out there. Honestly, their pressings just look insane. But I've got links to all of these bands underneath me. You can check them out. Please support them, because they are such fantastic bands and all really need our help at the minute. And yeah, let me know what you've been listening to this month as well, because I'm always up for hearing what you guys have been listening to. And I will probably see you, well, hopefully see you at the end of October for my October favourites. So thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you very, very soon. Take care, my friends, and be safe.